I take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Jaideep Keval Ramani, our moderator. Jaideep is the CEO of Legacy Services. He is an executive program graduate from Stanford University. Jaideep has over 22 years of experience in leading and developing business across service and technology industry. He has worked with companies like Thomson Reuters and Zenza Technologies. Jaideep holds the patent for an artificial intelligence algorithm. He actively participates through speakers and panelists through opportunities in industry forums like NASSCOM and CII. Jaideep is the founding member of UAVA India. I'd like to introduce Suhas Tulsapurkar, founder and director of Legacy Services and managing partner of Legacy's Partner. He has worked as in-house counsel with companies like Blue Dart, SR, and Enron. Suhas is a member on the committee of several bodies like United Nations Global Compact Network of India, ISACA, Global Tourism Council, MCCIA, trustee of TRAIN, that is Trust for Retail and Retail Associates of India, member of Blockchain Council. I'd like to introduce Mr. Anil Gupte. Anil is an entrepreneur, innovator, and educator. He currently runs his own company called Quadrones, that is one of the cutting edge of IoT and drones for use in logistics. He also advises small, medium startup businesses on growth, innovation, and strategy. He lectures on invitation to colleges and industry events, as well as technical and business forums. Anil has won several awards, including the Wipro Wharton Global Innovation Competition. He holds 9 patents, and the latest deals with drone delivery to ports. He was educated at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He is an active Rotarian and Paul Harris Fellow. I welcome Brigadier Mike Mendonca. Mike has more than 3 decades of value-added experience from functional to strategic levels in the private and public sector. He has served in both urban and rural settings in multicultural environments, including extremely hostile geographies. A combat paratrooper and Army aviation helicopter pilot with varied techno-commercial and leadership skills. He is currently the CEO of Rise and Shine Biotech and proprietary of Kosar Consultants. I also welcome Amrit Pati. Amrit is a drone engineer with Drone Tech Labs. His area of work includes IoT for drone, autonomous system, fleet management of drone over cloud using 4G, 5G network to improve communication for command. I welcome all of you once again, and we are waiting to have some fun. Jaideep, I give it to you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Good morning, everyone. The subject is close to our hearts, and thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday morning. The Unmanned and Autonomous Vehicle Association of India was created to develop the ecosystem of unmanned and autonomous vehicles in India. We'll have Anil talk about it more in detail, so I'll leave it to him. But just to tee off the conversation, this sector has a lot of potential, a lot of promises. It's a sunrise sector, so can create a lot of jobs as well when most of the industries are talking about reduction and so on. Amrit, you just mentioned about SpiceJet receiving a go-ahead to start trials. I mean, this literally came in last evening, so that's good news for all of us. Drones during the time of COVID-19 have been utilized in a variety of situations across the world and in India. In India, we've heard reports of drones being used in Chandigarh, Bombay, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, and a few other places as well. Some interesting applications, but most importantly, they've been used for surveillance to ensure the lockdown. Also for broadcasting key messages across communities. There have been reports of the drones being used for spraying disinfectants across huge tracts of public and community areas. So that's been one effective use. Drones have also been used, of course, for medicine and grocery deliveries to areas that are remote and would typically take a lot of time, or logistics and supply chains which have been disrupted. So that's been one good application. And there have been reports of drones being used in China for temperature checks, equipped with thermal guns. You could fly them in tight communities and with facial recognition identify someone and check the temperature. So a whole bunch of applications are being put out there during COVID-19. But more importantly, let's examine what's happening in India. Obviously, our supply chains have been disrupted. Our healthcare system is under stress. So let's examine what has been the regulatory preparedness and what is the current framework. We'll also examine how can we use drones to restore the supply chains during the COVID-19 times, and also how we can reach out to the remote areas with life-saving medicine and grocery supplies to help the citizens of this country. I'll request all the panelists to start with their opening comments. Maybe Anil, you'd like to go first. I know you want to talk about the association as well. So maybe we could take a couple of minutes and then we could have your opening comments as well. Anil, over to you.
Thanks, Jaideep. So I'm going to first talk about UAVA, as you mentioned. And I'm just going to share my screen, as you can see here. So the UAVA, or actually more accurately, the UAVAI, and you can, that's the Unmanned and Autonomous Vehicles Association of India. You can go to the website at uavi.org. So this organization was basically created, and I won't read all this which is on the screen, but basically it was created because I felt there was a need to move drone technology and drone usage forward. And a number of other people thought so too. I met a lot of like-minded people, some of who are on this panel today, and also other people in the background. We felt that drone technologies would work very well in certain instances in India, but that the government was not encouraging it for obvious reasons, for security reasons and so on. So as Jaideep also mentioned, it's a sunrise technology, it's a sunrise industry. And India could really lead the way because we have the right mix of people who know the software, which is the most important part of it, and the IoT and so on. So that's why this association was created with several like-minded people. And the idea was that we would guide policy decisions of the government and also speed them up. And we would educate people on the use of drones so that people are more familiar with them and more likely to accept them. And also encourage its usage across India legally and ethically. So this is our charter. Again, I won't read everything here, but basically we want to have an ecosystem where people exchange information, help each other, collaborate, create a vibrant marketplace, and also to persuade government agencies to accept UAVs, not only to use them, but to accept public use of those. So this is, again, information that you will find on our website, uavi.org. And I encourage you to visit the website and also sign up as a member. Just signing up on the website is absolutely free, but you can become an active member of the organization, either you individually or as a company. And we're looking forward to knowing more about companies that are working on drones, collaborating with them, perhaps helping them or taking their help. Thank you.
Anil, thank you. Could I request you to share some opening comments about COVID-19 and drones?
Yeah, so we all know the important areas, which again, I think Jaideep mentioned in his opening comments. But monitoring is, of course, the most commonly known one. And in fact, monitoring is being used not just for monitoring crowds, but also for monitoring operations. For example, the railways is using it to monitor their trains and whether they're running on time, and also any problems with the tracks and so on. Uh, the Army has been using it for monitoring and so on. I'm sure Brigadier Mike will have more to say on that. But Jaideep mentioned monitoring crowds for temperature. There's a company called Dragonfly which claims to be able to actually read your temperature and do facial recognition at a range of 60 to 70 meters, which is quite a bit. So these things are technologically possible. Of course, there are legal and ethical issues involved, but I'm sure we have some experts here on that, Suhas and Jaideep from Legacy. So I'll leave that part to them. But there are also privacy issues, which I think should be part of the conversation here. And, we'll talk about that more. So there are many other uses, which again, I'll talk about, for example, in construction and in automation and all that. But I'll turn the mic over to others for their opening comments.
Thank you, Anil. I'm not sure if Suhas turned off his video or we lost him. But there he is. Suhas, opening comments from you, please.
See, thanks a lot, JD. Thanks, Anil. Thank you, Mike and Amrit. Welcome to this webinar. Good morning to everybody. You see, if you were to look at what is the global scenario and where we are, I think before moving on to the COVID situation, or let's say contextual manner in which we look at the drones, and I'm going to call them drones and not UAV for simple reason that everybody understands them far better. You see, if you look at the global markets today, see 65% of the share is with the US. You see, probably all other countries other than China probably are within the realm of almost 14%. China is about 5%. We are nowhere in the reckoning if we look at the global markets. And that kind of opens up opportunities, because globally, I think the markets are opening up. The various use cases, not only use cases are coming up, but applications are coming up. So we have various predictions in terms of where this industry is going to go. However, I think since 2018, we have had some semblance of regulations in place. We have CAR 1.0, which is already in existence. We have DigiSky. We now have Garud, which is like COVID-specific contextual exemptions that can be sought. Having said that, I'm saying that there seems to be tremendous potential here in this space. There seems to be India as a country is only it's not even scratched its surface today. I mean, if we were to look at some of the predictions, somebody came up and said that we have $4.14 billion opportunity just in construction business, qua the drones. I mean, somebody came back to say that, there is a $1 billion opportunity in India if you look at its applications qua agriculture, which is like crop surveillance, soil monitoring, fertilization, and stuff like that. So I think while everybody understands there is a humongous opportunity here, there are very few players currently in India. The regulation is at a nascent stage, which is CAR 1.0. I think it's an industry which is poised to grow. And COVID is probably that catalyst, that agent of change, that's saying the world got to move without any contact. And in that sense, I think the drones will probably play a pivotal role if we all come together, whether it's government, whether it's large manufacturers, whether it's OEMs, whether it is services company, whether it is training. So I think if all the stakeholders are brought together, and from that point of view, I think, Anil, thanks to your vision that you thought about UAV AI almost about 4 years ago now. And I think that's kind of a visionary statement that you made. So we see large opportunity here. We see regulations at a nascent stage, requiring a lot of overplay. We also believe if everybody comes together, I think we can change the paradigm of the manner in which large populated country like India can at the same time maintain social distancing but stay connected. There are various applications that people have been talking about, and what you mentioned, JD, is definitely possible when you actually look at uh, the kind of temperature controls being directed. You can actually pick up, and I was told by one of the budding startup in the drone space, Mr. Siddesh Kotwal. He actually told me that he's working in this space to say that during a crowd of thousands and lakhs of people, how can you pinpoint and pick up, identify people who have high fever? That's going to be huge, kind of a if we make it successful. But for that, I think all of us need to work together, all stakeholders need to work together and look at this in a very, very positive manner. That's JD, my opening kind of a view.
Thanks, Suhas. May I now invite Mike to pass the opening comments, please? Mike.
Webinar. Yeah, okay. What has happened is that you've given an overview to the entire proceedings, and most of you have given a lot of deliberation and thought to it. I'll just give you some little inputs that I consider to be relevant in this case. We would also need to look at drones in the underwater category, because you will now have autonomous small drones that work for, let's say, underwater, undersea pipelines, cables, etc. Some of them are already existing, but in this overall ambit, I don't know whether Anil would like to consider it to expand the horizons of drones as such and include this aspect of underwater drones. So this is one issue that has come up. There are issues as far as security is concerned. For example, in the COVID-19 context, uh, the French aircraft carrier and USS nuclear carrier uh, had been affected by COVID-19. So effectively, they are out of action. Therefore, what are the issues, or can drones replicate the kind of services that can be afforded by an entire large entity like a nuclear aircraft carrier? So, oversee uh, uh, issues related to drones, especially in the military space in the COVID-19 situation, uh, can take place. There is another issue that we recently had is with the infestation of locusts. What we have seen over Delhi, etc. So that would pose a threat to drones per se, because you have uh, swarms of locusts across. Whether it was engineered or otherwise is also a moot question, because there are some of us in the defense who believe, and this has been on the cards from Unrestricted Warfare, which mentioned about pandemics, also written by two Chinese guys in 1999. They also mentioned this issue about locusts being used uh, as an instrument of warfare, or let's say war by other means in the agriculture sector. So, plus they also pose a very viable physical threat to drones. Suddenly a swarm of locusts entering a locality or an area or a city would pose problems to the drones, in the physical sense. As far as COVID-19 is concerned, what we need to do is to probably look at the geographies involved in three-dimensional airspace. For example, there are in Pune itself, there are designated red zones. These are not permanent. It's a very nebulous, dynamic situation where red zones are designated and undesignated at a regular pace. Uh, so therefore, where we use these and how we use these would also have a impact on the entire situation, and probably they would have to be an integrated approach to this. It would not be a standalone approach. It will have to be integrated because eventually airspace management will become an issue. Like we do have for aircraft, we will somewhere down the line, we will need to have it for drones too, which will of course be part of this regulatory system. I do not know the details of what is in place right now. We were mentioning other issues, including platforms like Garuda and all, but these are my few thoughts on the subject. Jaideep.
I'm not too sure if the locusts have been engineered, but that's a very interesting perspective given your armed forces background. Thank you. Amrit, you're the youngest and the most enthusiastic on the panel. You kind of tinker around with drones as your hobby and as a profession. Opening comments from you, Amrit.
So yeah, what I'll do is like everybody I've told about your opinion on what's terms of drone and regulations. So I'll just put a light on what have been done till now with the drones and what we are doing with drones in COVID-19 and what can be done in future. So in past we have used drones to basically survey square kilometers of land, a lot of land for water department to basically for various aspects and we have done a lot of things with volumetric analysis, and there's a lot of applications we have been doing till now. Let it be volumetric mines monitoring, or surveying the crop for their quality health. Now, coming to what we are doing with the drone in COVID-19 is where we are now spraying pesticides, disinfectants through drone spraying systems. And then we are basically using drones to monitor basically lockdown violators. And maybe in globally people are using drones to supply essentials like medicines to lockdown people. So learning from those internationally, what we can do right now is, there are a lot of places in India where it is very difficult for a person to get medicines on in like minutes notice. So what the drones can do is now basically help minimize this time and go to the location and deliver that medicines. Or if it's somebody, if there's somebody who is under quarantine and doesn't have access with the basic supplies. So what we can do is now we can fly drones to give them the basic essential supplies. By this way, basically, we can minimize the contact flow. And one of the important and one of the interesting application what I've seen is country like China, they are using drones to basically speed up their testing process. That's how they are doing is that basically they are collecting the samples and loading it onto a drone and sending it to the testing center. It takes they have reduced their time from half an hour, 1 hour to basically within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they are able to get this blood samples from the site to testing facility. There are many such applications, and in terms of future, what we can do right now is we can we have thousands of people in a crowd. So what we can do, drones with the thermal sensor, it can identify the people with higher body temperature, which can represent that they are maybe one of the suspects for suspects for COVID-19. And there are many such examples we can use drone. How basically the main idea is to basically if India and India government can basically fast speed up the process of adaptation and regulation of drone policies, that could help in this whole scenario.
Thank you, Amrit. Before we move on to our next topic, Suhas, you wanted to talk about the locust issue.
Yeah, thanks, JD. I think very interestingly, I think Mike talked about danger to the drones because of locust. I think although the locusts are, I mean, now Mike knows this far better than anyone, at least far better than me, is that there is an advisory already issued by Ministry of Aviation, DGCS more particularly, to say that locust is a threat to the aircraft. Of course, it would be threat to drones as well. But very interestingly, using the Garud, the exemption route, you see the Ministry of Agriculture and basically Farmers Welfare, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, made an application to DGCA to say that we should now be permitted to deal with locust by use of drones and I mean, broadly, the remotely piloted aircraft and remotely piloted aircraft system, which is really drones and drone system. Now, interestingly, you see, as on the 21st of May, DGCA actually permitted or granted what they call as a conditional exemption to Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. So on one hand, there is a danger that locust will actually attack drones, aircrafts, etc. On the other hand, drones actually seem to provide a solution to tackle the locust problem. Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare went ahead, got this conditional exemption. It's very interesting to look at what are the conditions of exemption. You see, what it really goes on to say is that, I mean, currently we are in CAR 1.0, therefore only battery operated rotary wing RPAs are allowed. There is nothing else beyond rotary and battery operated which is permissible today. We do not have a regime by way of which there is any enabling provision for beyond visual line of sight, as the people in the trade know, BVLOS kind of systems are not permissible in India till today. Therefore, we stick with this condition of battery operated rotary wing RPA only. Interestingly, they are saying that third party RPA services can be availed by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Therefore, if you are in this business, if you have drones which are capable of certain amount of payload, which can be, which can actually spray the pesticides or deploy the pest control systems across locust, a third party is in the business through Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. You see, currently, Garud only permits government and government agencies to make that application for exemption. And this is the temporary measure during the COVID-19 and emergency situation that's being talked of. Collaterally, if we were to look at where will this money come from, I think the state disaster systems and state disaster recovery funds, SDRF as it is called, today has earmarked certain funds for locust, and that does not include use of drones. So on one hand, ministry says use of drone is possible, could be important. States don't have fund to do that, or they will have to deploy their own funds. SDRF can't be drawn for that. SDRF can be drawn for use of trucks to spray pesticides on locust. Now imagine a situation, a difference when locust is there, locust is flying or moving from one place to other place, you are able to spray it with drones, and you have budgetary allocation or funds available at the state level for spraying this through the trucks. The kind of difference is very demonstrable and visible for anybody, and it's self-speaking. You see, from this perspective, while there seems to be attempts today Now, for the government and attempts by everybody to look at drone technologies, drone systems, and what government calls as drone ecosystem to be used for larger public good, I think there seems to be a lack of understanding and concerted efforts. We haven't seen, I mean, if there is an opportunity, we would have seen at least half a dozen service providers coming forward to say that we will tackle the locust problem, but doesn't seem to be. Sorry, I mean, I digressed into the actual reality qua the Garud, the exemptions, and the locust.
Absolutely on the point, Suhas. Thank you. Let's very quickly move on to our next one. And again, this is a question for all the panelists. Let's see what you think about it from your perspective. See, the COVID-19 has exposed Indian industry's supply chain vulnerabilities. Let's talk about the last mile supply chain, because that has impacted all of us on this webinar, and everyone that we know. Retailing in India is one of the pillars of our economy and accounts for about 10% of our GDP. The market alone constitutes about US $600 billion. Just to give you a perspective, in the US, the retail industry is $5 trillion. And the population is just probably a fraction of what we have. So there is an enormous potential. But the next year or two is going to be marred by all of these COVID-19 situations where people are going to be afraid to step into the malls, accept deliveries, and so on. And we've heard reports of stockouts of medicines and essential supplies. Contactless delivery is the latest retail tech buzzword, right from direct to store or fresh meal delivery companies. Several apps have been rolled out in the last 75 days alone for enabling shoppers to select contactless delivery. Let's hear from the panelists. What is your view about how this will shape the future of retail in India and the last mile supply chain?
So, Jaideep, if I might address this question, but also some housekeeping stuff. So somebody had in the audience has asked for the link to the UAVI org, which I posted in the chat. But I want to address Brigadier Mike's question on the maritime drones. So in fact, in the UAVA, we have a gentleman, Commander Das, who is ex-Navy and who is very much into underwater drones. So if you like, I can put you in touch with him. And this organization that he's running is the Maritime Research Center. It's based out of Pune University. So definitely you can get in touch with him here or through me. So, which also brings me to an important point. When we all, Jaideep, you know this, we started the UAVA, the Unmanned and Autonomous Vehicle Association. We did expect the scope to be much broader than just simply aerial drones. So it's terrestrial drones as well, and maritime drones, underwater drones. And I want to add, even autonomous space vehicles. So basically we want to be very broad in terms of what our organization covers. And why these satellite-based drones or satellites are important is it addresses the exact question, Jaideep, you asked right now, which is logistics. And in fact, my company is in last mile logistics, so this is one of our key sort of reasons for existence, the drones. The satellites actually help to map, today they help to map real-time movement of goods and people. And many of these satellites are actually running on open source software, running open source programs for organizations. And I'd encourage you all to look into openstreetmap.org. So this is a crowdsourced information sort of website which uses satellites to map all kinds of things, from landmarks to movement of people and so on. And we definitely would want to use this information, in fact, trying to use this information in our logistics business. So knowing where something is and being able to efficiently track it as well as to reroute it. Because right now, if you look in many of these cities, there are barricades and containment zones and a lot of things where a lot of obstacles where we have to reroute our deliveries and so on. So this, this pandemic is teaching us a lot about how to do that. Furthermore, one of the things that, in fact, this last patent that has been issued deals with drone delivery. And one of the key things about drone delivery, whether it's a pandemic or elsewhere, is that it cannot happen unless you have the capability of positioning the drone to within a few centimeters. Because anywhere in the world, but especially in India, if you're going to drop medicines or any goods, if you're off by even a meter, you would end up dropping it in somebody else's balcony or somebody else's garden or rooftop. And GPS, as you know, is not accurate enough. GPS is only accurate on an average about 7 meters. So this is why we have to create these, and we are working on these technologies which basically allow precision delivery, which allow you to place your package, whether it's medicines or whatever it is, into an exact location. So again, this will be very useful, I believe, in this situation, the current COVID situation. So I'll leave it to others to add to what I've said so far.
Anil, I have a question for you.
Yes.
One was that we were coming down to GPS accuracy levels.
GPS accuracy levels are actually not enough.
Yeah. So what really happens is, let's say, for example, the GPS system itself, what we commonly use, has got two sets of bandwidths that they deploy. One is for the military, the US military, and one is for us, where it can come down to probably down to a meter. Now, what happens is, if we use the GPS system as we commonly know, you use the GLONASS system of the Russians, you use Galileo of the Europeans, somewhere in this triangulation business, the degree of error will start reducing. So I don't know, you would probably throw some light on it. Is there some effort towards this end to start triangulating with all these systems put together to get more accuracy?
So I hate to do this. As a moderator, I'm also responsible for maintaining the boundaries of the conversation. We have a very diverse audience. Mike, if you don't mind, and Anil, we'll leave the technology questions towards the end. We have a whole bunch of audience who came over here to talk about retail and COVID-19. So with your permission, we'll keep it a little towards the end once we are sorted with the questions, if you don't mind. But Mike, thank you so much for raising that point. Mike and Amrit, very quickly, and Suhas, any quick comments about the impact of drones on last mile delivery, especially for supply chain related issues and contactless delivery? Suhas, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. You see, the last mile delivery, and I think from the logistic perspective, we always looked at it as a challenge. I mean, when I worked with Hindustan Lever, I knew how a lifebuoy would reach to the remotest area in Bastar. And that to me was actually the last mile delivery. You see, when we started and when I started working with Blue Dart, I really understood it's not only the lifebuoy, but even a document needs to reach the last mile delivery today. When we're talking about social distancing, I think in combination with various other forms of transportation, I think we'd have to look at drones being used for last mile delivery. Notwithstanding the lack of accuracy, as Anil just now mentioned, or Mike was talking in terms of triangulation, and then saying that it needs to be precisely delivered. I think when there are lots of sensors that can be built onto the drones. I think you will be able to deliver this precisely. But more importantly, I think for last mile delivery in COVID kind of a situation, in emergencies, in natural disasters, world over, applications have been developed for use of drone. Now, whether it is during the floods, during any other natural disasters, I think the use of floods is use of drones is really really articulated well across the world. We are lacking that. Therefore, we are saying that these are new uses or these are probably innovative applications and use cases for drones. I wouldn't think so. Last mile delivery is absolutely essential, especially during the disaster period. And I think drones can be very effectively used uh, to deliver, to ensure that that delivery happens. That's my take, JD.
Thank you.
I would like to add. So last mile delivery, I would focus on more of like drones should be used supply of medicines and essentials, not of like pizza and because if you can get a pizza 10 minutes in a delay, it's okay. But when people start thinking of that drone delivery is starting, that doesn't mean that you will start getting pizza and your beard trimmer in within like 15 minutes. So I don't think so. That is going to happen. And yes, of course, there are a lot of challenges in terms of when we are talking drone deliveries in India. So there are a lot of challenges in terms of economics. Sending a delivery guy on field and getting it delivered will be much more cheaper than sending a drone. Whereas drone, it should be used on like supplying some medical emergencies like life-saving drug from one medicine, which is suppose there's a hospital which doesn't have a certain medicine, they can simply ask their other medicine suppliers to basically deliver them this medicine. So that way, basically, we can use really use this drone technology instead of sending a paper toilet or pizza. So that's my take on this on last delivery.
Thank you, Amrit. Let's very quickly move to Mike. Sorry, did you want to add something to this subject before we move on to the regulatory issues?
Yeah, actually, what happened is, you mentioned about last mile connectivity, last mile delivery. Probably because of the accuracy issues and other issues, maybe we could think of a system where you have a drop-off point. So maybe you have designated drop-off points. I'll give you a small example. Today, in the colony that I live in, we are not allowed to have any home deliveries. The home delivery guy comes, either he remains at the main gate or he drops the stuff out there, but it requires you to go out from your apartment, go to that delivery point, pick it up and come back. And if we have these issues about accuracy, instead of getting into the last meter and we remain at the last mile connectivity situation, I think that's what my thoughts were at this point of time.
Thank you so much, Mike. Let's move on. Before we open up the Q&A, we'll just cover one more point. See, the use of drones still faces a lot of regulatory hurdles. Some of them are evident, some of them are yet to be developed. But we know that there are several countries who have embraced drones much on a broader scale than India has. The world of aviation and aerospace is actually on the cusp of a revolution based on autonomous flight and drone technology. And the use cases have been spoken about. But reaching that potential will require new regulations and advances in technology to enhance safe operation. I think we touched upon that very briefly. By and large, the fear of making a mistake drives a risk culture. And let's explore what does it mean from a regulation perspective to open up this industry so that while we will wait for the pizzas to be delivered by drones, but how do we make drones available under a good regulatory framework for making sure we are able to open up a whole new sector, create a whole new range of jobs, right from drone pilots to surveillance to the counteracting effects of drones as well. I mean, you don't want drones to venture into restricted areas, so you'll need a lot of drone security as well. Let's open up the conversation with Suhas, who's a legal expert, and you could talk about regulations, and then we'll move on to the other panelists. Suhas.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, JD. You see, post August 2018, where I think CAR 1.0 came in as the first regulations, uh, we're talking about CAR 2.0 now, and I think it will get accelerated because of COVID-19 situation, and that the fact that today I think there is a far greater awareness, so it will get accelerated. I just want to kind of narrate what is this CAR 2.0. You know, it talks about operations. Currently, I think in India, operations are limited to your sight. In a sense, it's not beyond visual line of sight today. So BVLOS operations will get regulated in CAR 2.0. Today, that's not permissible at all. Second, you will have algos, algos kind of for piloting the vehicle. So in a sense, autonomous operations related regulations will come in to the forefront. We're talking about a drone corridor. We're talking about new principles for airworthiness of drones. Uh, I mean, there are a host of such things in terms of regulation that form part of CAR 2.0, including a traffic management system which will be dedicated. There will be, of course, digital sky is there, but there will be digital sky for the service providers. See, what we are forgetting today is that you need a service provider who will actually provide a service. It could be the person who owns the drone can also provide the service. But I think the world over, considering the use of drones, there is something which is emerging, such as the service provider. So you will have probably digital sky, which is like a platform for operators, platform for service providers. There is a tremendous kind of push on pilot training. There is a talk, and there are draft regulations about the drone ports, where you actually have a facilities dedicated for taking off and landing of UAS. Uh, there is a currently, I think the payload and the cargo system in terms of air freight capabilities is very low. I think the new CAR 2.0 is talking about increasing that payload, because for defense purposes, if you look at the technologies that have been developed by DRDO, I think the technology has been developed in India uh, to a large extent on the defense side of it. We are also talking about, there is 100% FDI today. So we're talking about making India and indigenization, but more importantly, and probably the most important element that I think we all as a stakeholder need to focus on and put together is insurance as a factor. You see, because the exposure due to commercial operations on the drone operators, drone service providers, the professional liability for insurance cover of the individuals, including those who are kind of manning all the operations, all of that will go on to see whether if there is a damage tomorrow, how will that damage get insured. I think we've learned this through, we started talking about this in terms of nuclear power plants. As in Indian context, there is a complete unlimited liability on these issues, on the tortious issues, and therefore putting an insurance cover in place is the most essential element. So regulations are being talked about in terms of CAR 2.0 on all these elements. And I'm sure once the regulations come in, we will probably have a level playing field, level as in level playing field qua the foreigners. But let's look at, can you manufacture 100% indigenous drone in India today? Answer seems to be no, because there are lots of components that we do not have capability of manufacturing at at, at a very cost efficient in a cost efficient manner. So I think our ultimate objective should be, while we look at manufacture and creating manufacturing capacities, we will have to look at developing the software and software solutions for the use and applications. We will have to look at creating the entire regulatory framework for ensuring that the ecosystem runs well. I think broadly, my view on the regulation is that we are on track. COVID will probably accelerate that, CAR 2.0 and looking at new regulations coming in. Thank you very much, Jedi.
Thank you, Suhas. Mike, any views on the regulatory issues in India?
No, I think, what has been covered so far and what Suhas has just mentioned, I think it's quite comprehensive, and it's another Pandora's box. If we open, it can go into multiple issues, especially as he mentioned, where it concerns insurance. And by and large, I think I quite concur with him. What he said was right. There is a requirement. It's work in progress. There are not many issues involved, and we take it for that at a later stage. Yes.
Thanks, Mike. Amrit, before we move to Anil.
I saw in upcoming regulation, one of the point Suhas raised, UTM and control things. So past few years, I have been working on UTM and services. So there should be something. The UTM is already in force in India, where now we are operating a drone beyond visual line of sight. So you should have something called unmanned traffic management to basically enforce your no-fly zones, and the zone should be basically needs little permission and all these things. So that's one thing basically in terms of regulation which is coming up. And UTMs are basically a very powerful tool where we can basically, when we are talking about insurance and these guys can basically utilize UTM service, UTM to collaborate, to see the drones basically, how basically they can get their logs and various aspects through UTM. I think that's one of the regulatory which is coming up.
Thanks, Amrit. Anil, you're on mute.
Yeah, so this is my favorite soapbox, regulatory issues for drones. And I'm very strongly of the opinion that the government needs to make the regulatory process more efficient and more friendly to drone companies. By that, I don't mean that there should be no regulation or even less regulation, but we have technology and we have fantastic technologists in this country who are building systems for other countries. We can easily build systems for India. And sorry to say, the Digital Sky platform has not been very reliable. In fact, Amrit has, and his some cohort has created something very similar to that. We need to have systems in place where people can actually get permission to use drones very quickly, very efficiently, without a lot of paperwork. So those are really the important regulatory issues for me, that which is reducing the impact of regulation on businesses. How that's going to happen, I think, is simply that all of us create this massive ecosystem of drone startups and legal experts like Suhas, and interested people like Mike and Amrit, and really lobby the government to allow us to use this technology. I don't think we should be afraid of this technology. I mean, the argument is that you can use drones for nefarious purposes, for terrorist activities. You can use phones also for that. You can use phones to coordinate terrorist activities. You can use phones to trigger bombs. Does that mean we deny the use of phones to the general population? It's not even possible. We should look at drones in the same manner as we look at cars or even phones, as a commodity that can be used nationwide for all kinds of uses that you and I maybe can't even think of yet. But the only way to do that is to actually allow people to build drones, to use them, to innovate. Nobody can innovate in the area of drones unless they've actually tried to use a drone. So anyway, that's my soapbox. That's my feelings on regulatory issues.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's move to the Q&A section. I think we'll go a little over 11, but I think we have time to take a few questions. The first one is from Vishal Khopkar. Would you, Priyanka, can I request you to unmute Vishal Khopkar so that he will ask his question?
Yes.
Vishal, could you raise your hand so that Priyanka could identify and unmute you? Yep. Yes, Vishal, I think you have the ability to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So my question being to the entire panel, how exactly are the air routes going to be established? Considering that we've all across India, we've got many obstacles even in the air. And today there is something, tomorrow there might be nothing. So how exactly are the air routes going to be mapped, and with the different kinds of drones? There might be micro drones too, there might be some jumbo drones that might be carrying some deliveries. How exactly are they planning to go about it? Will there be multiple layers? How will there be specific routes? And how soon would this happen? Because it's like just like the highways has got established, the business started working on it. Similarly, if the air routes are established, people will identify business on those routes. Thank you.
You're right. I'm sure all of the panelists are equipped to answer that. But essentially, as the regulations come in, you will see all the grades available for micro drones to delivery drones to logistic drones, how the airspace is going to be divided, who gets the preference. So I'm sure the regulations will cover all of that. You have an opportunity to shape all of that as a part of your interface through the industry association. I know, Anil, and you should talk about it. When the first public information was sought around the policy, the UAVA actually put out a response to the government. Anil, you should also add to this, please.
Yeah, so as an organization, we had written to the government, but we didn't receive a response. So I'm not sure what happened with it. But you're absolutely right, Jaideep. The only way all this can be done is through, an organization like UAVA and a bunch of interested parties, maybe even outside the UAVA, who approach the government and make this happen. Now, to directly answer the question that Vishal raised, I'm sure, and actually Amrit might be able to jump in on this too. It's established the same way as air traffic routes are established for airplanes, and maybe even roads are mapped. So in fact, initially, I think most of the routes will be coincident with existing roadways, highways, freeways, and so on. But yeah, there are some major issues, and mainly those issues have to deal with wires. And I think that's what you were referring to, Vishal, that wires are a big problem for drones. They're hard to recognize and they appear out of nowhere, and they can be basically a killer for drones.
Thanks. Suhas, any comments around this?
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. You see, there is this, the entire traffic management system would be there as contemplated under the CAR 2.0 regulations. You actually have, we will have a well-defined corridors, which will be carved out of the spaces currently, the carving out of spatial areas within the airspace is what is contemplated as a part of the UAS traffic management system. These corridors, as they say, will be they will be designed, and they can take any shape. I mean, in a sense, in the form of, there would be forms of zones there. It could take a shape of cone. It could take a shape of cylinder, tube. It will have multiple connected tubes as the entire corridor would be set there. You see, you have various grids today in India, and I'm sure once you have this corridor set up there, once you have the traffic management system that is set up there, it will be dedicated drone corridor with dedicated US traffic management system. That's what is contemplated, and that's what will emerge.
Thanks. The next is from Shubham. I guess that's a question for Mike. I think Shubham has two questions. Shubham, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Very good morning to each and every panelist over here. So my first question is that, like, why are the top-notch technical institutions are not taking up this technology as a mainstream initiative or as an integral part of their curriculum, considering that it is a very important thing in coming future?
You said that there were two questions.
Yeah, and the second thing is that how ADE and DRDO are contributing to the needs of the nation during this pandemic time through this R&D of drone technology.
Okay, I'll answer the second question first. As far as the DRDO is concerned,
Mike? Oh, looks like we had a freeze. While we wait for Mike to come back, Amrit, you want to talk about the question on why educational institutions are not taking this up as curriculum?
So yeah, I would say they're already started taking this in their curriculum. Top-notch institutes like IIT, IIT Hyderabad, and various top-notch institutes, they have already included drones in their curriculum. So in fact, IIT Hyderabad has, I guess, 2 credit or 5 credit course in their bachelor's degree. I'm not sure exact stream, exact stream, but yeah, they have a very dedicated subject related drone. And in fact, I've worked closely with IIT Hyderabad for one of our projects. So they have a very dedicated lab setup where they have a very a lot of various drones, flight controllers, sensors. They have been actively working on this drones side, and in fact, IIIT Hyderabad also is working on drones. They have labs basically. So many institutions are basically slowly coming up with their drone as a part of their curriculum, and also they are setting up labs. In fact, there is another University of I think Hyderabad. University of Hyderabad, they have something for drone. There are many institutes, I would say.
And you're right, Amrit. In fact, I was at IIT a few years ago, and I saw that they have a dedicated hangar and an airstrip for the students to play around with all of this. Thank you so much, Shubham. Thanks for your question. The next,
in fact, I'll add one more thing. IIT Hyderabad is something working on passenger drones. So for that also they need a huge lab, and I think it's interesting way how these institutions are working towards it.
Sure. The next question is from Naveen. I guess, Naveen, if you can unmute yourself, I think that's the question asked.
So basically, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is maybe like how you say, like, just like flying cars and Uber and Ola are actually individuals are owning the cars, and Uber, Ola are taking orders from multiple sources and basically using them for taking orders and using them for the various services. So similarly, maybe individuals will be owning drones, matlab, for their personal use or maybe for commercial purpose, and a central company will be there, and they will be taking orders from for usage of drone and just creating a platform. So what is the possibility you like?
Suhas, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So, Navinji, thanks for that question, which reminds me that the way I think everybody looks at drones is you're trying to compare it with an automobile. Okay. You look at it from the safety, security, and the government and the regulatory purposes. They look at this as an aircraft. You see from which angle you look at it. Therefore, if you're saying that yes, you can own a private aircraft and follow the rules, which are the car rules applicable to the aircraft, fine, very well. I think there have been systems in the US, for example, the FAA permits the companies. For example, UPS has tied up with a drone company that owns the drones, and the delivery is done of UPS documents and UPS cargo. So actually, there is an integrated model that would come up. So you're right. Probably when you're talking about Uber Ola probably doesn't own any vehicles. Vehicles are owned by somebody. They are agglomerator. They are service providers at the best. Similarly, a service provider is probably contemplated during the drones. But I think from a mindset perspective, we got to look at it as aircraft because it will be regulated by DGCA world over as well. I think even in the US, FAA regulates the use of drone. So I think the regulations are bound to be, and mind you, aviation, as all of us, all the panelists here know, and most of us know, is probably the heaviest regulated industry and the business.
Thank you, Suhas. But who knows, we might leap into the space right from a few airline operating companies to suddenly an Uberification of the drone, this thing. So we'll see what the future holds for us. The next one is
actually, I'd just like to make a comment on that, Jaideep.
Sure.
I'm very bullish on this model because actually Naveen has disclosed our business model in the future.
No. Good one, Anil. Good one. I think that's a business model. Yeah.
Right. The next one is from Anjali Singh. If you could raise your hand, Priyanka can help unmute you.
Okay, hi guys. It's a really interesting session to kind of see a lot of companies in India emerging and working in this space. So my question comes from the fact that we have been working a lot with farmers to digitalize them. And that has been a big struggle to working with farmers because the language and digital technology is moving away from entertainment towards technology for working solutions has been hard. So when we discuss about drones for agriculture, that's a great idea for monitoring for many purposes. So I was thinking when people talk about technology with farmers, the rate or the cost of error is very low, right? Because you look at an app and you make a mistake and it's completely fine. And you can recover from it without paying a big cost. But when you start using drones for end users like farmers, the cost of an error is huge, right? Because you can damage a drone, which is very expensive. So when we are trying to make solutions for end users, be it delivery boys, be it farmers, they're the people who are the end user, but they're also struggling with technology. So how are we trying to make technology accessible or usable to the end users who are still struggling to adapt technology itself? So any comments on that part?
I like to answer this. So basically, agriculture, in terms of agriculture and drone, is like huge potential. But since there is already regulation placed in a drone cannot be operated by an unlicensed pilot, so that already limits their ability of anybody untrained to basically operate these drones. And when there's the idea of Uberization of drone and these things, so how this scenario will work in future is like people ordering the drone services over app and people coming with the drone, doing their work and going back. That's kind of the model which it will be working in future. Anil sir, you want to add something?
Sure. I just like to add over here that Anjali, we have to look at the drone. I think Suhas also mentioned this from different perspectives. It can't be just, I mean, your comparison with the mobile app or a mobile phone. I mean, that's not fair. Think of drones as piece of technology, and you also want to regulate what technology falls in what hands. Like you have gun regulations. Not everyone can own a gun, so you can't really compare a gun to a mobile app. Similarly, comparing drone to a mobile app is also unfair. There will be gradations available in terms of what type of drones are available to whom. You'll need licenses to procure them, licenses to operate them. So this will not be a free run for all. It should not be. So there will be a lot of safeguards put in place before this kind of opens up, and it should open up in a phased manner. Anil, you want to add anything? You're on mute, Anil. Anil, you're on mute. Anil, you were on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I said, no, I think it's been pretty much covered and I'll just repeat myself. But Ajay Chitnis has been asking to contribute to the GPS accuracy aspect. So if you can give him a minute or two.
Sure, Ajayji, if you could raise your hand.
He's one of our members.
Unmute you.
Member of UAVA.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ajay, please go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to add this to the accuracy of GPS that was being discussed, and then the discussion was cut short to go to the next subject. You know, we have this thing in already in place called digital GPS, sorry, where the GPS that we all use is the commercial GPS, which is available free of cost virtually. When you want higher accuracy, like in the, let's say in the offshore industry, where you have to position a rig exactly at that point where the well was capped, then you got to have, you know, within few meters accuracy, within few, really few meters means within a meter or so. So you use the digital system for which you pay. You pay the GPS operators and you get the digital GPS. So I'm sure any drone operator, you know, who wants accuracy will use this digital GPS to position his drones wherever they're exactly required to be positioned.
Excellent. Thank you, Ajay. I think we've already overshot our time. Let's quickly move to closing comments and then we can call it a wrap. There are a few more questions. We'll try and take that offline. Suhas, closing comments from you.
Thanks, JD. I think this is kind of completely sunrise, and as I mentioned earlier, the regulations are in place. I think whether they're adequate, they're inadequate, that's a question and that's a matter of debate. I don't think at any point in time any industry is happy with the regulations that come from the government. So I mean, taking a balanced view there, I'm saying, yes, there are enablers within the current regulations. Since 2018, we've been late in this fray. As a country, we've come in very late. We need to look at this sector very carefully by all stakeholders. If CAR 2.0 comes in post-COVID or lockdown gets released, I think, is the industry ready? Who are the investors today into this sector who are willing to, you know, stake their neck out to say that we will put our money behind in the drone sector? And I think that is a huge area which is a question mark currently. There are startups, and I'm sure there are at least about 40 startups that we know of who are struggling to raise funds for drone technologies, because at one end they're not very clear in terms of what their business, what their revenue models are. And I think that's why I think what Anil said and kind of smiled about the business model and the revenue model, I think putting that together is the crux. We need a lot of hand holding, and I think UAVAI is something where we can do and open up various avenues, but more importantly, where is the money that's going to come in this sector? You see, today we're not able to manufacture drones indigenously because the various components, various parts that are required to manufacture drone are not manufactured in India. Why? And why would anybody manufacture? Because there's no market here. Why is there no market? We can point finger at the regulator, but more importantly, I think we need to ensure that the private sector and the businesses put enough money behind this sector and realize this is for future. My take, JD, is that while during COVID period, you would look at these drones as kind of help from the sky. Otherwise, you will look at them as cameras in the sky only for the purposes of investigation and surveillance. Then you will forget about it. You will forget all other applications which are far more important than merely it being camera operated surveillance. Within visual lines, beyond visual. So it is a sector where I think lot needs to be done today from the point of view of private sector and all stakeholders. Yes, regulations and governments today are merely enablers, but we have to find our own way in our own manner and ourselves. So in true sense, I think the drone ecosystem needs to be Atmanirbhar and not depend on anyone else. How do you make that happen? And I think there is the crux is what are the revenue models and who is going to put the dollar behind the idea. That's my take, JD.
Thank you, Suhas. Anil?
Yeah, so I'm with you, Suhas, in that we have to be Atmanirbhar. And I want to reiterate that, I'm not against regulation, but I think we love regulation a little too much. More important, even if there are regulations, they need to be very easy to comply with. I'm okay with strict regulation, but I think drones have a huge future. It's again going back to our original statement, Jaideep's original statement. It's a sunrise industry, and we could very easily kill it by over-regulation. And one of the things they say about the IT revolution in India and how India actually came on the map of the world in IT is that the government didn't know how to regulate IT, so they let them do what they want. And I think that's a good data point to remember whenever we're talking about regulation. So I think that once regulations are easier to comply with, there'll be a huge burst of activity in the drone space, in the unmanned and autonomous vehicle space, both car 2.0, drones, space vehicles, whatever. And uses that we can't imagine now, or some that we can, will be serviced by a lot of companies. There'll be a huge amount of innovation, and I'm really looking forward to that time.
Thank you, Anil. Amrit?
So I think there are a lot of things coming up in upcoming days. I think we should be more focused on using it for good instead of finding loopholes in the system. Drone can be used, yes, drone can be used as a bomb, but it can also be used as for good also. So I think we should be more focused on good instead of finding loopholes. And yes, there are a lot of new things coming up like UTMs and other things which will make people using drones for others very simple. And yes, I think that's the take from my end.
Amrit, thank you so much. Clearly, a great panel discussion. Thank you so much for joining in. The call is very clear. We need to innovate more, come together, and also help the government come up with regulations that actually enable the industry. The recording of this webinar will be available on the uavai.org site in a day, plus you will get invitations to visit the site. Thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday morning. Have a great day ahead, and thank you to all the panelists over here.
Thank you, Jaideep. And thank you to all the other panelists. I enjoyed this. Yes,